Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hi, this is Celine Williams hosting from Ontario for Canada's podcast. My guest today is Faye, who is the Canada Country Manager for Xero, the global small business platform with more than 2.7 million subscribers worldwide that's dedicated to making business beautiful. Faye brings nearly 15 years of experience building businesses from the ground up to her role. Welcome, Faye.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. You have a very interesting background and story, and I'd love for you to start by sort of sharing with our listeners how you got to do what you're doing today. What has your journey been thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might take us all the way back to explain a little bit about my why. And so, the story to know about me is I'm the daughter of immigrant entrepreneurs. They came to Canada and settled in Mississauga and started their own business, which they ran for 23 years. And so I watched them come with not very much, classic Canadian dream story, and build that business up over 2 decades. And to this day, the thought of them toiling away, trying to make it without a lot of support, really trying to figure out, do we have the cash flow? Can we pay our team? What do we need to grow? Those are the fundamental questions that small businesses today still wrestle with. And it's what I'm particularly excited about in terms of Xero's ability to have that impact in the Canadian market. So it all starts from us coming from China way back in the 80s and settling here and living that Canadian dream. In terms of my career path, I started in marketing. So I went to Queen's University for commerce. I graduated and took up a job in CPG, where I absolutely loved the consumer psychology element of it. I loved the brand building and strategic thinking, but I knew that I was missing some of that entrepreneurial spark, the speed and the pace. And so I actually ended up taking a step back. I have what I call my quarter life crisis in my early 20s and said, I don't know if I want to stay in CPG. I don't know if I want to be in big companies. I'm going to do what everyone does when they don't know what they want to do. And I'm going to move to Vancouver. And so I did that for a summer and, absolutely loved it. Took a step back and just tried to think about what do I want to do with my career? And is there a place that maybe is a bit more of a fit with my values and the entrepreneurial spirit that I have, grounded in me? Ended up working for a great little Canadian company. I say little now, tongue in cheek, called Mark Anthony Brands. So know brands like Palm Bay, Mike's Hard Lemonade, White Claw, phenomenal brand building capability, really strong, obviously Canadian focus. Absolutely loved my time there. But I was still hunting for, even more innovation and pace. And in 2015, an opportunity came up to join Uber Canada. They were launching and scaling a little product called Uber Eats, which in its current form then was basically a lunch product. And you may remember this. They used to have cars driving around downtown Toronto, and you could, open up the Uber app and order, one of 3 dishes that day. And I just thought this product was going to set the world on fire. I said, this is incredible. I can get my lunch in 30 seconds. It turned out that was truly MVP of what we were eventually going to build, which became the Uber Eats app. And so I was very, very lucky to be on the original launch team that actually brought Uber Eats to Toronto as a global first. And we launched, December 2015, kind of shut our eyes and hit go and said, is this going to be something that people want to use? And it turned out obviously to be an incredibly influential product, something that really upended delivery in the Canadian market. And I think ultimately really sort of charted a new course for restaurants and how they can make money and generate incremental revenue and awareness. And for consumers, just a new way of exploring and enjoying the communities around you. So that was my journey kind of from CPG into tech. And then about a year ago, I got a call from Xero. And to be very honest, I didn't know that much about the organization, but as I dug in and learned about the passion for small businesses and the opportunity within the Canadian market, I just got really, really excited. Saw all the same ingredients of that recipe that we had with Uber Eats back in 2015, and really feeling like we're at an inflection point for the industry. And so that's why I made the move, and just really excited to be on Team Xero these days, helping to think about how we help small businesses, really build up and build back better.
That's fascinating, I did not know that Uber Eats sort of globally. I didn't know that Toronto was an inflection point. So that even just that, I was like, that is so interesting. I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions inside of this, but I'm guessing, and I could be very wrong, and I'm fully going to own that this could be a very wrong assumption, but I'm guessing that Uber Eats, what was quite a large organization by the time you left, and that Xero is maybe not quite as large, and it may and I appreciate it's growing, but maybe not as large. Is that a safe assumption to be making?
It's an accurate assumption. So, they're actually, the two companies are pretty close in age. Both started about 15 years ago. When I joined Uber, I was in and around employee 4,000 globally. And that's just about where we are at with Xero globally today. So yes, it's obviously a different scale, totally different business, right? Marketplace business versus obviously a lot more of the B2B focus here at Xero. But there are a number of similarities in terms of moving from that startup phase to a scale up, and how do you harness the energy and excitement and rapid iteration in the early days, but actually build a process and a platform that allows the 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 employee growth. That's the aspiration. A lot of similarities in the two organizations, sort of navigating that at this juncture of their maturity.
Yeah. So I think it's really, I appreciate that, because I was going to say, I think it's really interesting that Uber has such a direct to consumer focus, right? And Xero clearly has a B2B focus. It's focused on small businesses. And so what in your role or in your experience, what are some of the differences that come with that? What are some of the opportunities that come with that? What are some of because that's a big divide in tech in general. And I think that you have an experience on both sides, and how it affects internally, how it affects the impact it has on the client, whether it's individuals or businesses. So I'm curious what your observations of the differences are, and what's great or challenging about each of them.
Yeah, for sure. It's obviously two very different business models, right? Whenever you look at Uber, whether it's on the ride sharing side or the Uber Eats side, we talk about marketplaces, whether 2 or 3 sided. And in those cases, balance is really important, right? If you drive a ton of consumer demand, but you don't have enough restaurants or delivery folks to help deliver that, you actually create the perfect storm of a bad customer experience. And similarly, when we talk about Xero, we always talk about this idea of a dual flywheel, right? So not only do we need to be increasing awareness and consideration and customer experience on the small business side, but we're almost just as focused, if not more so in a lot of ways, on the accountants and bookkeepers that serve them, because we know 2/3 of Canadian small businesses actually work with an accountant or bookkeeper at some point in the year. And so that's their most trusted advisor when it comes to, hey, what accounting software should I use? Or I've got this particular business challenge or lack of visibility to cash flow. What would be your recommendation? That recommendation is really powerful. And so if we were to just focus on small businesses, we'd be missing out a huge swath of potential promoters and advocates for us. And if we were just to focus on accountants and bookkeepers, we'd be, pushing water uphill, because the small businesses would say, well, I don't know a lot about Xero. I'm more comfortable doing something else, right? Or sticking to pen and paper or using Excel, et cetera. So it's not either or, it's actually, we need to do both. And that's really similar to marketplace businesses, where you need to ensure you're rising supply or demand equally at all times where possible.
Yeah. And I love that. And that makes it so, I think it's a very interesting approach to be dealing with both individual or, accountants and bookkeepers. I'm calling them individuals. I recognize there may not always be, and small businesses. And I'm curious what you see, are you seeing trends in terms of where small businesses are going, or what they're thinking about, or when they're, where the accountant bookkeeper becomes really key? Because I think that it's a really unique lens to have visibility in both of those places. And a lot of our listeners and viewers are small business owners. And
yes.
they're curious. Listen, I think a lot of us who are small business owners have cobbled together what we do with a whole bunch of duct tape and string and hope for the best. And, you have a lens on some of the trends or opportunities or potential that's out there that we may be going, I hadn't thought about doing it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously goes without saying, last year and a half has been incredibly difficult. Our research shows us that, it's never been more top of mind for small businesses around resiliency, and this idea of digitally mature businesses are more resilient. They can react faster. If you think about things like government grants, access to capital, the more that you have your business digitized, the quicker you can respond to the black swan events, the quicker you can take advantage of net new opportunities. The easier it is for you to determine where you should pivot when you get thrown a curveball. And so research has shown that, hey, small businesses really top of mind, really want to focus in on that. And where they're turning is to these accountants, bookkeepers, and advisors. And more, we're seeing this switch from, hey, I'm just going to come to you once a year so you can help me do my taxes at the end of the year. And then I'm not going to talk to you for 364 days. And then I'll see you next year. We're seeing that shift to, hey, maybe we should chat monthly, right? Or maybe I've got a big business decision, instead of feeling like every entrepreneur, which is, I'm going to have to figure this out myself and Google is my best friend. There actually are experts, and there are people that are in your court and have your back. And so, obviously that's a bit of a different mindset shift and behavior shift, but we are seeing that more and more, where small businesses are increasingly, embracing this idea of do it together, right? With an accountant or bookkeeper advisor versus I've got to DIY everything myself.
You mentioned digitally mature. It's one of the pieces of language that you use. Can you, for those who are listening who may not fully understand what that means, can you give a sense of what you mean when you say digitally mature?
Yeah. So we actually partnered with the Brookfield Institute to do a study around this. And they looked at a whole bunch of data around, how connected small businesses were, right? What percentage of their operations were in cloud-based technologies? How many apps do they use to power their business? And here at Xero, we're super focused on the ecosystem, right? We want to be a small business platform. And so we actually plug in with over 1,000 connected apps, everything from expenses to accounts payable, accounts receivable, reporting. You've got a business problem. There's probably someone in our ecosystem that has an app to solve that for you. And one of the really cool things that we saw coming out of COVID was, small businesses that had 5 or more connected apps into Xero actually saw a lower revenue decline and a greater ability to pay their staff, right? Because we have visibility on the back end to all that information. And so for us, the more connected you are, the more digitized your operations, the clear takeaway was, we expect you to be more resilient to those types of unforeseen circumstances. You've got that data at the tip of your fingertips, and you're able to action that more quickly.
I think that's a really important lesson for anyone who's listening. And I don't want to skip over it because there's so much. Listen, I have been in the position where I was very hesitant to, attempt to learn a new piece of software or, add something to the mix. And there's the access to data and information and, speed and ease and all those things. Once the initial, setup happens, which is true for any change, right, is extraordinarily different. And that's really what I hear you saying is, regardless of, I'm talking about the resistance, but regardless of any of that, once the data is there, once it's connected, once people have access, it is easier and it does make a difference. And it's getting over that initial fear of change or the unknown or the new as a small business owner to be able to be in a better position and be more resilient when things are hard. And things are going to be hard off and on. There's going to be challenges all the time, whatever they might be.
Absolutely. And just to build off that, we think of ourselves sort of like 2 main things that we're really passionate about. One is change management, right? So yes, Xero is a tech company, but we're built by humans and we're used by humans. And so you have to have that lens on what it takes to implement change management well, and to know those mental blockers, and to know about that trough of despair on the tech adoption curve. Like, our team studies that pretty fanatically, because the better we can do that, the better we can help our partners actually implement the change and do it successfully. And then the second thing that we're extremely passionate about, my husband will tell you my love language is efficiency, and that's true for a lot of accountants and bookkeepers. But it all comes down to time, right? If time is your most valuable resource as an entrepreneur, how can you use technology to get time back so that you can actually focus on doing the things that you love, right? You can feel free to jump in and correct me, but I don't think you got into doing your own thing so that you can balance your books at the end of every month. That's probably not the thing that you get pumped about.
Nope.
But there are tools that do that for you, and they do it using ML and AI. They do it in an automated way. They do it while connected to all of your bank accounts and other systems. And just, we talk about business being beautiful, and we really believe that. We think technology can enable, that seamless workflow that happens in the background and allows you to just focus on building your business, servicing your customers and doing what it is that you love. So the efficiency component is really important to us, to the extent that when we bring on a new partner, we do things like efficiency reviews, just to say, how much time did you save per file versus how you were doing it before, now that we've implemented this tech, right? So those are the types of things that are our hero metrics around, is it going well? Is it working for you?
Yeah. So and this may not be linked, but you mentioned earlier as well, this idea of build back better. And I'm curious, because you spoke about building a few times in there. It may not be linked, and it might just be my brain putting the two together. I recognize that. But I'm curious if build back, like what build back better means for you and for Xero, and if it is linked to what we're talking about here somehow. Or maybe it's something entirely different, which I'm very open to having created a link that's only for me.
No, I think we can talk about that in the context of, listen, just to draw the parallel with Uber again, right? Before Uber Eats and, a lot of these other delivery platforms really exploded, if you were to go in and talk to a mom and pop restaurant, and say, hey, we can do delivery, they'd probably say, what, actually, we're good. We have our neighborhood around us. We've been here for 25 years. We've got our regular customers. We don't necessarily want to grow. And that just seems like too big of a change and a shift. And then, COVID happened, and it sort of forced the hands of a lot of those restaurant owners to say, okay, actually, I do need another revenue stream now. I need to reconsider, how I go to market, given all of the obviously challenge and reality around me. Right. And so they were able to pivot quickly. And now this is just such an integral part of a lot of businesses, and has exposed them to a lot of new customers and revenue streams. Right. I think the same can be said of small businesses, where COVID really forced a lot of them to say, wow, that improvement that I was thinking about, the new system that I've been humming and hawing over, I've been saying I wanted to get payroll onto this thing for years now, and just never happened. All of those things suddenly came right to the fore. And it was like, you have to, right? Now you've got no choice. But at the end of the day, once you go through that adoption and that change, it's going to be better, right? It's going to be more efficient. It's going to be more seamless. It's going to give you more time back to focus on doing what you love. And so when we talk and think about building back better, it's really the silver lining of the last year and a half, and all the challenge has been, it's really forced small businesses to rethink how they operate, and to really kind of focus and hone in on the core thing, right? Anytime there's a lot of noise, it's really about prioritization and focus. And that has spurred a lot of really interesting conversations around, okay, maybe it is time to take that leap. Maybe it is time to move my accounting and my books into the cloud. I've been thinking and considering it for ages, and now feels like the right time to take that leap.
Listen, I love the idea of rethinking in general. I'm a big fan of, unlearning, rethinking, challenging the assumptions that we have and have made to date. And so I think that it is unfortunate that it has taken a pandemic for a lot of people to get to the point, a lot of business owners to get to the point where they're willing to do that. And I think it's really important that, it is happening, and that quite frankly, an organization like Xero is so mindful and thoughtful about that awareness and encouraging that and supporting that, with the small businesses on the platform, off the platform. I think that's a really incredible thing because it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could build on just what you said, I think the other really interesting sort of element of building back better is we've been working from home now for, a year and a half, right? This was such a novel concept before. There's this notion that only a small percentage of the workforce is ever going to be able to work from home permanently, successfully, and not have a drop in productivity. Well, I think the last year and a half has really popped that bubble in terms of, hey, actually, there's probably a way to build back better as well as we think about the employee experience. And I'm super passionate about diversity and inclusion, and Xero is all about creating an environment where people can do the best work of their lives. And so what I get really excited about is rethinking, to your point, what that proposition looks like for progressive companies, right? And how can we embrace all the learning that we've gotten from the last year and a half and create worlds where, a single mom of two, can still hold a great job and not feel like she's making sacrifices because she can't come into an office 5 days a week, right? We've just seen such a opening here, I think, for people of all backgrounds to be able to work at companies that they really have and feel a values alignment with, because of this embracing of work from home and hybrid, flexible work schedules. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Yeah. And so I love this because I want to shift into sort of the, let's call it the experience of Xero as an employee or Xero as an organization, not necessarily what's doing in the world with its platform, which is great. But, there is the tech world, this bigger conversation. I'm curious, where do you see Xero specifically, but let's also say tech companies in general, we're starting to rethink some of these things? And what is the opportunity, or what are the trends that you're seeing there? Because listen, if there's one thing that has also become even more important in the past year and a half, unfortunately, because of some of the things that have happened in the States, is like DEI, belonging, having equitable workplaces as much as possible, and being conscious of what that looks like. And so I'm curious what you're seeing inside Xero in general in tech, because I think you have a really unique lens on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things I'd want to share there. One, so Rachel Powell is our chief customer officer for Xero, and one thing that she always talks about is this idea that in that traditional sort of who are your shareholders models and who do you prioritize, Xero has always been about prioritizing our internal team, our Xeros and employees first, because if you do that and you prioritize, their well-being and how they're feeling about the organization, they'll take care of our partners and our customers. And at the end of the day, that'll take care of the business. And so that really resonated with me even before I joined Xero. And I certainly feel it while I've been here. There's two main things that I would call out. One is this notion of well-being. So Xero actually has a global head of well-being, and we were really focused on this before it became like a pretty big buzzword over the last year and a half. But it's been something that's been super core to how Xero has been built. Every Xero has 10 well-being days a year that they can use at their discretion, above and beyond sort of vacation days off, whether it's about taking care of your family or you just feeling like, hey, I'm not doing okay this week and I need a day to myself. No questions asked. Those days are yours. And we try and do our best to encourage our teams to take those. And then no shortage of programming internally, just really focusing in on how do we help our Xeros craft their perfect day, find those focus breaks during the day, take lots of breaks, get outside, applying all of the science that we have around, what makes someone's well-being and how do you sort of foster that? And how do we create an environment, again, where people can really do the best work of their lives? So well-being is super top of mind for all of our people leaders up to our executive team. And then the other component is flexibility, right? So they kind of go hand in hand, but the more you can formalize and encourage flexibility around flexible working arrangements, around, this notion of work from home and having all the tools and processes that you need to do that well, the more we can enable our teams to really make work for them and work for their schedules and work for their families if they have, commitments there. And so we've really been focused on that. Recently, Xero actually launched a permanent remote roles program for our product and tech teams, which is really exciting and applicable here in Canada as well. So folks can actually apply specifically for a remote friendly role. And then, with that, have the clarity and the flexibility that they need, again, to do the best work that they can do. So we've really been focused on those two things, well-being and then the flexibility to enable our teams.
And I want to fully put on my biased hat right here and say, I really hope we see more of that, not only in the tech world, but in the world of employment in general, because I think that flexibility and the ability to work hybrid is I think it's more and more important for people. And when organizations are intentionally creating opportunities where that is built into whatever the opportunity is. And it's not someone having to go and advocate, because it can be really hard for people to do that. And it's not, there are fears of what the repercussions could be, false or not, it doesn't make a difference. They exist. So when organizations are really intentionally saying, we are creating these opportunities with flexibility that are remote, that are for the people that this matters in a specific way to, it encourages other organizations to do the same, because now it's the part of the norm. It's part of the norm that's out there. So my biased hat is I love hearing that. I really hope we see more and more of that, because I think that is, a huge component of attracting the best people, retaining the best people, enabling people to move around an organization effectively that in a way that works for them and their stage of life and their time of life. So I love that program exists, and I want to, really emphasize how much I love it.
Yeah, me too. And you're right. It's going to become table stakes, right? You see the odd company or two these days that are saying, no, it's everyone back in the office, 100%, no flexibility. It's just, to me, it's short-sighted. There are always going to be those roles that lend themselves to remote work. And, we should do everything that we can to keep great talent, especially given how competitive the market is these days. So I am very proud of how Xero's been showing up there.
Well, and I think it's an obvious way to show a real, not just the words that we're using, commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? By saying you don't have to live in a specific city. You don't have to be doing this in a specific way. This enables people who, for whatever reason, whether it's preference or a need or whatever it is, to really feel a sense of belonging in an organization. I think that's really important, because there's a lot of verbiage and language around, DEI and belonging out there in the world, in the tech world as well. And there's not always the action and behaviors that back it up.
Yeah.
In very obvious ways. And this is a great way of putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
I'm curious. I know that, we talked about DEI, and that's something that you're very passionate about. And I want to, before we wrap this up, I want to ask the question of how, where do you see changes happening? What do you see the opportunity as now at I was going to say end of the pandemic, but not end of, at this stage in the pandemic? Because I think a lot has come to light in the past year and a half, and a lot has changed. And I'm curious, because of your passion around the topic, what you're seeing, or either that's not working or is changing or is an opportunity, but kind of where do you see things at right now?
Yeah, I think, what was probably a bit demoralizing at the start of the pandemic, because when you looked at the data of what jobs were most impacted throughout the Canadian economy and sort of how that disproportionately impacted women, it really sort of took us back, right? There had been some good momentum, some good progress. There's obviously a lot of commitments from many organizations at every level. And then, when the stuff hits the fan, it's sort of the first thing to drop, right? It's okay, focus on business critical initiatives, and DEI things tend to get put on the back burner. So at the start of the pandemic, it was pretty, I would say from my perspective, demoralizing to say, okay, well, we're seeing this outsized impact on women and people of color. How do we, again, back to this notion of building back better and actually using this as a way to reimagine a new normal? I would say I've been really encouraged. A lot of these developments that we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months around, bigger focus, more, female-led startups, female funding, right? There's just a lot of really incredible momentum within the Canadian market. Obviously, we could use as much of that as we'll get, but I do think that there's a lot of really good momentum and a focus on it, and it is going to take a focus, right? Diversity and inclusion is a journey. There's no silver bullet, do this thing, and all your problems are solved, and all of a sudden you're set. It's a constant battle against systemic bias, systemic challenges, and organizations just have to be really committed to that. So from the Xero perspective, we've got a full DEI program that is led by Matthew Coons out of our Denver office. And he's just doing an incredible job really putting pillars into place to make sure on things like recruiting, on interviews, on, promo cycles, we are systematically looking at places where there might be bias and rooting that out. Where possible, we're taking data and informing our decision-making with that data. We are partnering with external third parties to make us better, challenge and poke and, really educate us internally about where we should be focusing our efforts. And so there's a lot of really amazing energy happening at Xero, particularly across the US and Canada these days, that I find really inspiring. But it definitely is a journey and not a one and done initiative that will solve all those problems.
And I think that I appreciate that. And I think it's really important to recognize and call that out, because there's going to be new things that we need to learn and unlearn that we are not aware of right now that will come up in the next 6 months, year, 5 years, 10 years, because it is dismantling the systems and biases and assumptions that we have that are so inherent. And we're all, not, I say we all, but in, let's say, North America, we're socialized in a particular way. And most people don't even question them. We're not aware of how deep they are, and we're not aware of the bias that it creates. And I think that I love that Xero has such a very clear commitment to challenging and changing that. And we're all going to make mistakes, and it's not going to be perfect. And it isn't this one specific outcome that is we all know we're there at this moment in time. If only it was that easy.
Yes, there is no finish line on this thing. But that's actually what gets me excited too, because I think there's just so much opportunity, and we have an opportunity. To me, that's a bit once in a lifetime at the moment of just crafting what that new normal looks like and really sort of building back from the ground up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very cool. Before we wrap this up, I want to ask the question I always end with, which is there something that we didn't get to that you want to make sure we talk about, or something that you mentioned that you want to emphasize before we wrap this up? Or you're good, and that's also an okay answer as well.
Maybe that I'll just put an exclamation mark beside a point that you and I talked about earlier, which is, for all the entrepreneurs and small business owners that are listening to this podcast today, really encourage you to reach out if you're not already connected to an accountant or bookkeeper and advisor. I've been there, started my own businesses, seen my parents do it. There's always this roll up your sleeves mentality and just put your head down and get it done. And I love that and appreciate it. And, that's what makes entrepreneurs so special. But one thing that we're really passionate about is you don't have to do it on your own. And so, make that call, find out how someone can help you, really rethink what tech tools you're using to power your business. And are there areas where you can get 1, 2, 3 hours back a week? I mean, time is your most valuable resource as an entrepreneur, right? And so how do you just get the time to focus on doing what you love? We firmly believe that in concert with that advisor and in concert with tools like Xero, you can actually get a lot of time back in your day and your week, again, to focus on building your business. So it always feels like you don't have time to find more time. You don't have time to build a new system or take on a new tool. But I strongly recommend people take this opportunity to rethink that and challenge you to do so.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to put an exclamation point. I think it's a really important point to emphasize. So thank you for that. And Faye, thank you for your time today. It's been really great chatting with you. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective and experience and speaking into the realities of many small business owners' experiences in Canada.
Thank you so much. It's great to be on.
And for our listeners, thanks for listening to Canada's podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe to all our channels to get the latest podcasts from entrepreneurs across Canada.